Hello everyone, welcome to another lesson of using Python and Blender to create a more advanced water model. Um, you can see this is a model from last time with the water going out. So, last lesson we finished the first part of our animation. And actually our animation split into 5 parts, which is put on the timeline here. So animation 1 is valve opening start, valve opening end. So like the valves that we know, like 5, 6, 7 opening and then closing, the overflow starting and closing, so the water coming out, the water animation, and then we close all the valves except for valve 7. And in this lesson, you're gonna learn why we didn't close valve 7, as long as some other animations. So let's get started. The first thing we're gonna need to do is to turn some of our frames into variables. Now, so basically, like frame equals 1, frame equals 10, we turn those into variables. So over here we define variables, then we put them in and replace them. You may be wondering why we need to do this. Well, it's because we might want to change up the frames a bit, and it's going to help us understand better how the relationship between like some frames and how they're like connected. So first over here is valve moving frame. Basically the time it takes for a valve to fully open or fully close, that's going to be 10 frames. Then valve opening start frame equals 30. So remember previously it was 10, but this time it's 30, which means, so our valve 5, 6, 7 valve vent, they're gonna start opening in frame 30 instead of frame 10 like last time. Alright, valve opening end frame equals valve opening start frame plus valve moving frame. Alright, so basically it's just when valve opening end frame is a start frame plus how long it takes, so you know that makes sense. And it's easy to change because we don't change stuff. We can just edit these variables instead of like going through each of this code and editing each frame. Alright, now valve closing start frame equals 100. So there are 70 frames between it opens and closes. This is because, well, it takes time for water to fill up this, and it's like more realistic, so it takes more time. It takes 70 frames to fill up this vessel, and also it's like easier to like go through. If we want to change it later, we can change it. That's why we're using variables, like I said. Overflow start frame. And let's remove that underscore. Basically, when the water starts flowing out, that equals to valve closing start frame. So when the valves start closing, the overflow starts coming out. Valve closing end frame. Well, that's just the start frame of valve closing. Plus the moving valve frame. And finally, overflow end frame. End frame is the same as valve closing end frame, because they like share the same. They basically like share the same frames because they're happening at the same time. Alright, now to replace these frames. So first frame 1 is that now valve opening start frame. And let's change this comment in shortcodes at frame 30. Then over here frame is 10. It's not 10 anymore. It's valve opening end frame. And now it's not open by frame 10. No, it's open by frame 40 because that's 30 plus 10. Okay. Now over here, frame is no longer 60. But valve opening start frame. And this is no longer frame 70, but valve opening end frame. And it's not opening. That's the thing. That's the first thing where it opens. This one's closing. Valve closing end frame. Between frame 60 and 70, nope. It's between frame 100 and 110. Alright, now we can fix these frames. So actually this one can stay frame 1 because it's mostly on a frame 1, but then over here the valve closing start frame, here is overflow end frame, and then it's not at frame 60, it's at frame, you look back at the picture, 100, and then at frame 110 you can stop the flow because that's also the time where you close the valves. Alright, now we're done adding the variables for the frames. Now we can do the rest of this lesson, which is animation 2 and animation 3. So for these animations, we're going to first animate the valve for opening start and valve for opening end, which is this valve right over here. It's gonna open and close. It's gonna open actually. I don't think we'll do animate it closing. So it's gonna open, and then this pump will pump water into the vessel. That's also why we kept valve 7 open, because if this was closed, then when we open valve 4, it still won't go into the vessel. So that's what we're doing. Next, the gauge H2 needles start turning, and so because of that, the pressure is going to go up. So the gauge over here, you see this needle? Right now it's like tilted this way, but once the pressure goes up, it's going to tilt like this way to show us that the pressure is getting up. And then for animation 3, there's just two variables: gauge, vessel, needle turn start, and end. So basically this is the same thing as the second part of animation 2. However, the gauge or gauge we're working with for animation 3 is over here. We're turning this needle all the way over. Okay, so now here's another trick. So since we're not going to remove this domain box until a few lessons later, right now you can go over the properties, like when you go to the animation tab, go down to display as, and change texture to wire. Right. Actually, make sure you're selecting the right one, because I was selecting the vessel, and we don't want the vessel to be wired. Let's go back here. Click on the domain thing and make it wire. Why is it not working? Alright. Alright, so over here, we'll do it over here then. So you can go over to properties, just the orange box, viewport display, then instead of go to the display as part over here and make it wire. That way the water, when it comes out, it'll be wired, but the box won't be there, so you can see the valve vent. And in future lessons we'll remove this box, so and make the water solid again, so it looks better. But that's time for, well, that's not what we're gonna do today. Okay, now we can start animating animation 2. So animation 2, first things first, you can see the wired liquid going down here. Valve 4 animation, no, not okay. Valve 4 the opening start frame, which is just valve closing, and frame plus 5. So 5 frames after the other valves close, the one on H2 will open. So 5 frames after these valves close, like 1, 2, 3, these valves close, this valve will open. Okay, and then obviously the end frame. And I forgot the E over here. End frame is going to equal valve close, valve for opening start frame plus the, what it's called, valve moving frame. So valve viewing frame. It takes 10 frames to move. So yeah. Alright, now for the gauge. Gauge H2 needle turn start. So when it starts turning, it's going to be 1 frame after it starts opening. No, it's done opening because, well, water can only come out when it's done opening. Then the H2 needle turn and is valve for opening opening wait not valve for opening, oops, gauge H2 needle turn start plus valve moving frame. So it takes the same amount of time for the valve to open as it does for the needle and the gauge to turn to the place where it needs to be. And that detects the pressure. Now valve for opening. Valve for opening start frame equals valve closing. Oh wait. I forgot, I got these two mixed up. So valve for opening, valve for H, which remember is the Python name we used when we made valve for that rotation Euler. It goes Euler 0, 0, 0, X, Y, Z. So it doesn't do anything yet because we're making sure it stays still at frame 1 to the frame it needs to turn. Frame equals valve for opening start frame. Then valve for H dot rotation Euler. So now we're finally telling it to rotate to Euler 0, 0. It's going to rotate on the z-axis. Math dot radians 90. Like the other valves because it's like the other valves. X, Y, Z. Then we're going to insert a keyframe for that. Rotation Euler frame equals valve for not opening start frame, opening end frame. Alright, we can test this out. But right after I fix not putting an underscore here and here, let's make the box wire again. Alright, so the valves turn, then water comes out, the valves turn back, and you can see the valve on top of this pipe starts turning, and so our animation for this works. Now gauge turning on H2. First we're going to define a variable called gph2 gauge, and then P is pipe, H2. And basically this is just telling is an easier way of writing not Euler dot data dot objects gauge pipe H2 needle. So we write a little less. G H2 dot rotation Euler equals Euler 0. Math dot radians -80 0 XYZ. So it starts at -80 because there's no pressure, right? So the gauge doesn't detect any pressure. The needle just stays like that. Then GPH2 dot keyframe insert rotation Euler frame equals huge vessel needle turn start. G ph2 dot keyframe, not keyframe, insert rotation Euler again, because we're rotating it to the point where it detects the pressure, and it's going to tell us with the angle of the needle, which is 30 radians along the, not along the, through the y-axis, x, y, z. And here is dot comma, but this, and then a comma after. And we can insert keyframe again. And replace this turn with end. So that's it for animation 2. Now for animation 3, it's just the same thing as the last part of animation 2. So animation 3. So we can do a lot of copy and pasting actually. So here you can copy this, and I forgot to comma this. So instead of gauge H2, it's gauge vessel needle turn start, and gauge vessel needle turn end, and here we actually make this 5 frames after end. So instead of +1, we do this +5, because you know it takes time for water to get through this pipe and into the vessel, so that the gauge detects the pressure and then the needle moves. Then for here, it's just the start frame plus valve moving frame, which is the amount of time that it takes for the valve and the needle to move. Okay, now let's find some stuff. G vt equals bpy dot data dot objects gauge vessel top needle. Now The rest is just the same. Instead of GPH2, we turned it into GVT, VT, VT, VT. And actually, the only thing left to change is the frame, because it's the same, negative 80, 30. It's the same animation, but on a different place and a different time. So the frame is not gauge, vessel, needle, turn, start. Wait. Alright, so here, actually, where's the front H2? When I was writing this, I was thinking of this, so actually, we don't need to change anything at all. Alright, so if we test this out, and fix, not putting underscores. Okay, so here it's gauge, vessel, top, needle. Because put 3 S's, only 2 should be allowed. And okay, it works when we're display as wire. And let's look at our second and third, because we know that this works. Because this is working, you see, wait, do you see that? This, the needle turns, and this needle also turned. So, which means that this animation worked out, and that's all for today. Bye.